Some fans, alongside the media and Amazon, blame other fans for their vitriolic hatred. They accuse you, perhaps, of viewing the show before it even came out with a 0 out of 10. Across major review aggregators, another portion of the fans has expressed their willingness to keep watching. Notably, Metacritic features a 1.9 out of 10. Amazon's attempt to readdress balance in Tolkien's world and deliver an inclusive fantasy prequel left many wondering. Is it boring, you may ask, or is it a gorgeous masterpiece? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, but whatever there's in between, I'm here for the concerns. Otherwise, how are flawed things to improve if everything they receive is praise? Therefore, can you hate Rings of Power? Even though you like it, you may see others are strongly against the show, and these others are offering a consensus Amazon certainly doesn't like. The audience of a show are its customers, primary support for any entertainment content. And if they don't like a particular product, regardless of the reason, the product can eventually disappear. The job of the content creators is making fans like the product so they can sell it, make money, and keep making more. So, taking note of fan reviews is key to determine whether or not an entertainment product can survive. Because, after all, review aggregator sites convey general feelings of disgust or appreciation.
It is a beautiful tradition.
I've seen the same thing happening multiple times. Corporations take old IPs and promise new content, but the content is less about itself and about its creator, and more about how many political topics can the modern creators include. My prior video speaks about the matter, and I encourage you to see it and comment on it. Rings of Power is yet another example gone wrong. The political marketing becomes too much, and the canon content too little. As a result, decades-old fans become angry and express their sentiment in every form they can, and the general sentiment towards Rings of Power is quite bad. It's so bad that Amazon needed to hold reviews on some sites. Perhaps the show is neither a 0 out of 10 but a 10 out of 10. Both are over-exaggerations, an attempt to silence the other side of the fandom. But we can be certain it's not getting the support franchise so big should get. Because the same fans expressing their hate against the pricey show are most probably the same supporters of House of the Dragon. Fan appreciation is a general sentiment. Fandoms can be very harsh when they don't like something, but they can also be very gentle when they like something, even if it has flaws. And by the way, if you look on IMDb currently, the site doesn't show user reviews lower than 6 out of 10 points, as if user-generated reviews could be wrong. See, there's no formula or template to put points on shows and movies. We do it by instinct, logic, and heart. Some use complex criteria, depending on their knowledge about filmmaking and storytelling. Others do it more casually, depending on how much they enjoy it. Most people also rate depending on how immersive the story is. Does it make you feel anything? Can you understand the characters and their motivations? Does the story feel human and challenging? But now, there's an additional element we're rating, which is our sentiment towards what studios are selling. Because most Western content comes full of political ideas, they are selling their worldview as part of the content's bundle. Rings of Power, for example, the show's bundle ships with the effort to modernize the fantasy genre and make it look and behave more like the modern world. By modern, they mean California, and by behave, they mean women and non-white men are always better than white men. They also mean every human interaction is tainted by a power struggle between different social groups. These groups ally themselves with others experiencing similar levels of privilege and oppression, which mostly depends on sex, gender, and race. This is intersectional feminism, an offspring of identity politics, and it's woven into the show.
The message.
How do politics influence the story? Politics are the reason why Bronwyn, Galadriel, and Nori are disagreeable protagonists, constantly going against the wishes and commands of the men ruling their king. It's also why Arondir watches over a town of filthy white men, treating him aggressively, and it's why Galadriel takes the role of a traditional male hero, but without the actual physique to carry the role. Politics are also why the creators made a female version of Aragorn, a diverse stoic elf like Legolas, and a female version of Frodo and Sam. They wanted to readdress balance, and they did so in a blatant way. It's also why they added peoples of color to all places of Middle-earth, even if it doesn't make sense within the story, like a blue-eyed, white Hardfoot with a mother that breaks the rules of genetics. Lastly, politics are the reason why white men are presented as dumb, weak, incompetent, evil, and pathetic, even if it means heavily changing lore characters. Either way, if you rated the show before it came out and gave it a 10 out of 10 or a 0 out of 10 due to its political offerings, that's still valid. It's part of what they are selling. It influences the story and you're rating it. This means no one is a hater, a review bomber, or a positive review bomber for giving the show credit or discredit for the politics it's trying to sell. But we can't know for sure how anyone rated the show. It could be because of the characters, the stories, the production, the storytelling, the politics, or something else. All of these reasons are valid, and these reviews already exist. And honestly, Rings of Power is deeply flawed. It's true that most reviews came out after the first 2 episodes. Still, the pilot of a show carries a significant importance. It should convey the setting, introduce the characters, introduce the conflict, and hook the fans all at the same time. While subsequent episodes can be better, there's a single opportunity for a first impression, and this first impression revealed deep flaws, weaknesses on the show's very pillars. The first problem is an insufferable main character, Galadriel. The show presents her as a royal lady, commander of an elite team of elves hunting for Sauron. She's everything but a good commander, or a lady. She is an asshole. She climbs the mountain ahead of the others, not giving a single fuck to the safety of her companions. She doesn't listen to the other soldiers and hesitates to help them when they fall. She stands idle as a troll destroys her entire team and then defeats the troll single-handedly. She doesn't search or care for her fallen companions and orders the rest to continue. No wonder the others left her alone. The pattern will probably repeat in further episodes, and it's a problem because she's supposedly the hero, and the show won't recognize these flaws or give her a space to grow and become a better person and leader. But we know the show will prove her right because we know Sauron exists. Also, she's a modern female hero, a character archetype that starts and ends the same way, emotionally and physically. Modern female heroes are an empty canvas capable of completing any challenge by themselves without consequences and above the orders and desires of anyone else. That's because they are often selfish, self-centered, apathetic, and unsympathetic, exactly what Galadriel is. The only exception is when she meets Elrond in Lindon, where she receives him with a warm smile. Will she have a proper character journey, or will it be more of the same? More of the same, for example, is making the cast around her complete idiots to make her look more competent. Another example is adding fake tension to most of her scenes, because female heroes will always be fighting against analogies of the patriarchy. Someone, a man, tells Galadriel no, but she says yes, and there's tension.
Even you couldn't possibly believe their old scrap would float.
It's not going to float. It's going to sail.
Make it worse, the actress behind Galadriel can't act. I'm assuming she can't do stunts either. Otherwise, this scene wouldn't look so bad. So she can't act, she can't do stunts. However, she's the main character and supposedly a super powerful elf commander. It doesn't sound very good. To give the actress credit, she sounds like a very good voice actress. For example, the prologue with her narration sounded and looked very professional. Which leads me to say the prologue is insufficient for both casual and hardcore fans. That's because the show has an uneven approach to world building and lore. Core flaw number 2. Go back to the books, the creators kept saying. At the same time, they clarified they were making the story with the appendices of the main books, the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit. For some reason, they didn't buy the rights to the Silmarillion, Tolkien Letters, Unfinished Tales, or many other Middle-earth books finished by Christopher Tolkien. Therefore, they took the little material they had as the reason to create a mostly original story. So if you're a Tolkien fan and expected to see a faithful depiction of Second Age stories like Numenor's fall in the Silmarillion's Akallabeth, this is not the place. You have the right to be a purist. You have the right to be angry because they promised it would be faithful. And if you're a casual fan, and here's the paradox, it won't be easy to understand the story. There are too many references to past events, characters, objects, wars, places, and enemies. But there's no proper world building. The show assumes that you know. For example, Celebrimbor mentions the Silmarils in episode 2. A casual fan won't know what this is. Still, the compressed timeline and original content will confuse Tolkien readers about when and how Fëanor crafted the Silmarils and what role they played in the story. Similarly, High King Gil-galad sends back the warriors to Valinor. A casual fan won't fully understand what Valinor means or what the king did. We didn't see a major explanation of creation, Eru Ilúvatar, the Maiars, the Valars, Valinor, and Middle-earth, and a Tolkien reader will still feel confused. You would know these things exist, but you would be hesitant to accept a High King has the power to send back their king to Valinor. Even worse, the show doesn't mind to explain what Sauron is. It just assumes that you have seen him in Peter Jackson's movie trilogy. It also doesn't explain who Morgoth is beyond being Sauron's master. Rather, it disregards the Dark Lord as an unimportant part of the lore. Overall, the show does plenty to anger Tolkien readers by not doing enough to appeal to casual fans. It's hard to understand for normies while offering a story that uses Tolkien's lore as Easter eggs and maps. And I'm connecting this reason to the filler nature of the story. Two major plots during the premiere are back and forth journeys. Galadriel travels to the seas towards Valinor and then swims back to Middle-earth, and Arondir and Bronwyn went to another town only to travel back to Tir-Harat. The rest of the story suffers from a slow pacing as well, and, in my opinion, it doesn't have the acting power or the compelling characters to keep it up. It feels as if the filler is stretched too thin. It seems the length of the chapters as well as the season is just random. These episodes don't need a full hour, or perhaps the season doesn't need 8 episodes. And with that said, I wonder, how come the premiere has over 2 hours of story, yet the prologue is about 5 minutes? Every element the show would eventually include should have been in the prologue, like the Silmarils. I also wonder, how come the premiere didn't introduce Númenor, but took so much time with their original Harfoot story? The Second Age is about elves and humans dealing with a mortal world Sauron would eventually corrupt. And as it is, hardly anything happens in the first 2 episodes. That realization grows even worse when you consider the plot conveniences. Time, logic, and distance mean anything, like characters casually walking thousands of miles in between cities, swimming entire continents, or finding rafts in the middle of the ocean. Lastly, the show's filler nature is treating Sauron as a winter is coming type of evil. However, there's a backstory for Sauron in the appendices the creators say they have, and it's not part of the show. Why? Did the creators feel they could do better? Because so far, I fear we've only gotten uncompelling plots and characters. The main problem is how almost every dialogue line is in service of the plot rather than the characters. Dialogue lines mostly detail tensions, objectives, and plot lines. As a result, characters feel unnatural, as if they are just reading lines on the screen. Similarly, established character relationships often feel awkward and unnecessary, like Arondir's relationship with Bronwyn, which already exists when the show begins, while the show tries to tell us it's forbidden. Nori's relationship with Poppy Proudfoot. Nori wants adventure and knowledge, while Poppy urges her to stay calm and quiet. Is there anything else, or is it just as two-dimensional as the prior example? We meet Celebrimbor and he's just there, telling us exactly what he wants to do and why, in a lengthy expository dialogue. There's also Elrond, following orders, smiling and being very nice and boring. And Durin, mad at Elrond because he missed his wedding, yet we don't know if he even tried to contact him. Lastly, there's the plot of Galadriel finding Sauron because she wants vengeance. What's the point of her trying to convince anyone while we, the viewers, already know Sauron exists? Even Gil-galad knows Sauron exists, but he decides to do nothing because he fears doing something will wake him up. All of these character arcs rely on telling us rather than showing us. And whenever characters talk, I can feel the clicks of the writer's keyboard. They made an effort to make conversation sound poetic and artsy, like rocks sinking because darkness is a temptation, or wind spreading fire, or the whisper of a thought of a rumor. Rather than poetic, it sounds childish. The poetic nature of Tolkien's world is not the dialogue, it's the morality. Dialogue is just there to fit the themes. Is episode 3 any better? The third episode follows the pattern I displayed above: a slow plot, disagreeable protagonist, unnatural characters, and uneven Easter eggs. Everything feels inconsequential, weird, and obvious. We all know the so-called mysteries are just leading up to a final explosive battle against Sauron. And it shouldn't be a mystery, it should be a fantasy adventure atop a conflict between corruption, temptation, grace, and courage. Sadly, the third episode made it evident that Rings of Power lacks underlying themes and dilemmas. Every good story should use a theme or moral questions as the backbone of the narrative. Rings of Power doesn't have such a backbone, as it's just about evil is coming. But the show doesn't even explain what evil is. I'll talk more about moral dilemmas in my next video. For now, even if you don't even touch the inclusive elements, you can dislike or distrust Rings of Power, or even reject the politics it's trying to bring into the industry. The show can look and sound very nice, and it has some enjoyable parts, but it's just not enough. Not enough for the investment, and not enough for Tolkien's fantasy world. The overwhelming negative feedback will make it very hard for Amazon to continue. Not many studios can do it. You need a built-in loyal audience to do it, and Amazon doesn't have it. I fear Amazon's failure and waste will leave us fans without the opportunity of seeing a proper and faithful adaptation of the Silmarillion. Stories like The Children of Húrin, The Fall of Gondolin, Beren and Lúthien, or The War of Wrath may never have a proper adaptation. My friend, if you don't like the show, you should ignore it. But what do you think? Leave your comments down below and keep the section
civilized. As filmmakers, as writers, we had no interest whatsoever in putting our junk, our baggage into these movies. We just thought we should take what Tolkien cared about clearly, we should take those and we should put them into the film. This should ultimately be Tolkien's film, it shouldn't be ours.